Our first reading is from Acts 16, verses 9 through 15. During the night, Paul had a vision. There stood a man in Macedonia, pleading with him, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately tried to cross over to Macedonia, being convinced that God called us to proclaim the good news to them. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. Our second reading is from John 5, verses 1 through 9. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, called in Hebrew Bethzatha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew he had been there for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now that day was a Sabbath.
As far back as I can recall, hearing Bible stories in the country church of my youth, this particular story that Renee just read from us from the Gospel of John has held significance for me. So when it came time, sometime back when Pastor Allen asked me to preach on this Sunday and choosing the lectionary passage, though I liked them all, this is the one that really called to me. And I'm sure you're on pins and needles waiting to find out. So I'll get right to it. It's really in the question that Jesus put to the man, who according to the story had been ill for 38 years. Now 38 years is a long time by any standard of human longevity, but especially during the time of Jesus, when life expectancy, especially for poor people, was not much beyond 40, according to many scholars. We're not told the exact nature of the illness, but from an attentive reading of the passage, we may presume that he suffered from some form of paralysis. Anyway, when Jesus saw him, he asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" In other words, do you want to be healed? Now, given the setting where Jesus encountered this man, it seems rather obvious that he wanted to be healed. After all, this is one of those mysterious places involving a pool of special water that seems to have been around from ancient times and still exists today, such as Hot Springs, Virginia, Ojo Caliente, New Mexico, and the world-renowned Baden-Baden in Germany. So given that this fellow was hanging out by one of these ancient healing pools, I think Jesus should have known that the man wanted to be healed. You never know when you're going to get a laugh in this congregation. He's laying by the healing water along with other invalids, the text says. What else do you need to know? Of course he wanted to be healed, and Jesus, who seemed to have a sixth sense about people, should have figured that out, right? In fact, earlier in the Gospel of John, at the very end of chapter 2, the writer says that Jesus knew all people. And furthermore, Jesus knew what was in everyone. Here's where it gets interesting. If what the writer says about Jesus is true, that puts a whole different spin on the question, doesn't it? Suppose he sees something in this man beyond the externals. Suppose that Jesus senses that the man's paralysis is not just in his body, but also in his mind, or maybe deep in his soul. Maybe it's more psychological than anything to do with his body. I wonder if you were struck by what the man said, as Renee read for us so well. What the man said when Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" The man says, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." pretty lengthy answer to a simple yes or no question, don't you think? And besides that, as I was musing about this story, I thought if all of you need to do to be healed is to be the first one in the pool after the water is stirred, why not move your mat? The text says he's able to move. Why not move your mat to the edge, and when the water's stirred, just do a quick rollover and kerplunk, fall on, you're in, you're healed. Or get somebody to push you in. I would do that for him. Or get some friends to carry you in. Maybe he didn't have any friends, I don't know. But over a 38-year period of time, couldn't one of those things have happened at least once? So it does appear that something else is going on here. Now maybe you're thinking I'm being unfair to this fellow, but actually I have great sympathy for him. Take for his example his inability to simply answer yes or no to the direct kind of question that Jesus asked. Do you want to be healed? Now I can go all around the barn to answer a simple yes or no question. Just ask my wife, who happens to be with us today. Norris asked me something, and immediately my mind goes into a guessing game of what I suppose she's really asking, only to find out she just really wants me to say yes or no. Now, I don't need to make light of this or be overly simplistic, but I'll ask you, why do you suppose the man didn't simply say, yes, I want to be healed? Now, I have another question. Maybe it's more important than that question. Does anything in this man's evasive reply register with anything in your life? Do you see any part of your life in this man? I will tell you without equivocation that this man's seeming ambivalence certainly speaks to me in this chapter of my life. And at the very least, his response makes me ask a further and deeper question. Where did I learn that it wasn't okay just to answer yes or no? To the point of this story, and so many other Bible stories, as well as stories from other sacred and mythological writings, is to use them as a lens through which to see our own lives. Otherwise, what's the point, really? This is true in so much of the Bible, and though it was written at a time so different than our own, the emotions that people faced then are the same emotions that you and I face today. The obstacles that kept people stuck in untenable situations are similar to the obstacles that prevent us from moving forward in our lives. And so it's really, really important that we're willing to look at these obstacles, but to do so without self-judgment or fear. That's really important. If we don't look beneath the surface of these stories, they simply won't hold much meaning for us. The Gospel of John in particular, it's a very stylized gospel. He's got all these I am sayings and 7 signs and so forth and so on. All these numbers, like 38 years and 253 fish or something like that were caught at the end of the gospel. And it's just completely, it's a magnificent treatise, really, and it's amazing. But it's not a historical account by any means. Not like Matthew, Mark, and Luke at least resemble Now, the writer of the Gospel of John is a highly creative, imaginative person, and he's trying to help us to see something about this Jesus who he refers to almost as a superhuman being, a God-man, somebody beyond compare. And unless we look beneath the gloss and the hyperbole to realize that what is being pointed to in the Gospel of John is the opportunity to see that this person named Jesus, to see that in that person rests the possibility that, like him, we too can live lives full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. Just as was described of Jesus. The potential is certainly present for us. Even Jesus is reported in the Gospel of John as having said, "Greater things than these will you do if you believe in me." Is that amazing or what? Now, we may not want to live a life that resembles Jesus because there's a cost to that. It's perfectly fine. But the possibility is there nonetheless. And what else is possible for us? To shift away from the individual for a moment, I wonder what question we might ask of ourselves as a congregation as we're about to embark on a new journey. What paralysis might we be experiencing? What might be keeping us from achieving our full potential? Mind you, I'm asking as one of you. I may be standing behind this pulpit this morning, but most of the time I'm sitting right alongside of you, wondering about these things that are spoken of up here. What paralysis might we be experiencing? What might be keeping us from achieving our true potential? You know, there's a reason that the story includes someone who's been stuck for a long time. This happens throughout human experience, doesn't it? Thinking and beliefs get calcified, so we're not open any longer to new ideas, new thoughts, new ways of looking at things. Relationships can get stuck in place, and churches can get stuck too. I think healthy churches don't mind asking those kinds of questions from time to time. And actually, that's exactly what we did, believe it or not so long ago when we filled out our congregational profile. We sort of asked, maybe not what do we want to do to be healed, but what do we want for ourselves? What is it that we would like to have happen? And I was so struck last week when Rev Allen was preaching, and he suggested in his sermon to imagine that the person who's coming to lead us already is looking down the road. Right? They're already looking down the road at where that person can take this congregation with our obvious permission, of course. Now, we can, in these few months remaining in this interim period, consider whether we will be willing to say yes to the possibilities that lie ahead. Personally, I have a deep sense that we're more than ready to say yes and to move forward in exciting new ways. I don't exactly know why I feel that way. Maybe it has something to do with the new people who have been coming lately and been sticking around to be with us. In fact, I've had the privilege of being with a couple of those new people on the search committee to see how deeply committed and devoted and how skilled and talented they are, and think, holy mackerel, you know, we've got riches, and we already have riches. That's one of the reasons I came to this church in the first place, is I knew who some of you were. I didn't know all of you, but I knew that there was a quality of people in this congregation. And I thought, holy mackerel, this is a place to come and hang out. So some shifts have happened in me. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why I'm excited about this next phase in our journey. I love being part of a congregation that doesn't mind asking questions. That we're not stuck in one way of looking at things. I can't tell you how important that is to me. This isn't in my sermon, but I was reflecting on what a challenge it was for me to preach many years ago in a congregation that really only had one way of looking at things, and it was such a straitjacket for me. It turned my guts, really, to be very honest with you, in knots, because I knew that the Spirit was calling something else, but it was so challenging because really only one answer was permitted. Here we are not bound by that. That's not one of our obstacles in this congregation. There's a free flow of thinking and thought and expression. It's a beautiful thing. So I like that. And it gives us freedom to move in different directions. I like the fact that we're thinking about how to recreate this space here to make our worship even more lively and vital. I like the fact that our values include inclusivity for all people, that truth and justice and peace are things that are part of our DNA in this congregation. That's so important. I like the fact that we're smack dab in the middle of wanting to heal this planet, and we're doing things that we can in this community to address that issue. We think this man had an obstacle. It's nothing compared to the obstacle that the world's facing right now as we seek to heal this earth and all the species on it. I like that we want to be part of overcoming obstacles. So, my friends, for these and other reasons, I believe that we are ready to say yes and to pick up our mat and to move forward. Amen?
Amen.